Hey friends, I I'm having an interesting day. I'm having I don't mean to say that in an ominous way. I just mean it's been a day with some really interesting energy kind of coming through. For one thing, I at least woke up at 4 a.m. bright as bright as a button, just not tired. Wanted to be awake from 4 a.m. I don't know how she's doing at school today. Hopefully, she took a long nap. But it felt oddly as though her waking up in the middle of the night was related to a kind of energetic disturbance that she was picking up on. And so it kind of, even as I was with her this morning and kind of trying to get her to go back to sleep, clearly realizing that's not going to happen, tried to get her to participate or be just kind of like do her own thing while I did yoga. She was not into that idea. She does not like to do spectator yoga, nor does she really want to be left to her own devices to do her own thing. She really wanted to play, which is eventually what we came around to. But I fought it for a while. Which is totally unrelated to what I sort of am feeling today. Not unrelated, but it's not the heart of things. I've had a sense of something. So I had a conversation with a really dear friend and client earlier today. We had a long meeting, and one of my big revelations in the middle of it, big epiphanies, was around the area of leadership. Because we were discussing how leadership really determines so much about an organization, about a family structure, a community, a country. I've seen this in virtually every organization I've worked in. Over time, you start to see how the habits and tendencies of the leadership really are part of the DNA of the organization. It's almost uncanny. It'd be uncanny if it weren't also so self-evident. But the level of subtlety on which this operates is what always gets me. Because it's like, it's obvious, kind of on one level, it's kind of obvious, like, the leader sets the culture, or the leadership team kind of creates the culture. But man, we're talking everything down to the most subtle little energetic vibrations that everybody's picking up on. If the leadership is exhibiting a certain kind of energy, that's what everyone will start to march in step with. And the effects are just incredibly subtle, and it always kind of blows my mind whenever I witness this anew. So as we're having this conversation about organizations and leadership and blah blah blah, I had a couple of thoughts. One was, it's really important for people who have the capacity for good leadership to assume that responsibility. Because how often do we hear so-and-so would make an amazing leader, but they don't want to do the job? And I fully understand that. I've been in that position, and but I'm just the older I get, and the more I really watch what's happening in the world and where the culture of institutions and communities comes from, the more I also see that a lot of times, there are these born leaders who, for whatever reason, can't take that last step of assuming the mantle of leadership. And it's, I did a post on power the other day. I feel like it's kind of percolating in my awareness right now. And this is, by the way, I'm talking about this kind of in the abstract. I'm talking about me. And I'm not saying that I'm some kind of amazing leader, but I do think I've been in enough institutions, on enough teams, in enough, groups to know where some of my strengths are anyway, and some of my weaknesses, some of my deficits. And I have a whole laundry list of kind of safeguards in my life that give me the opportunity to experience maybe like a taste of leadership, or a little episode of it, or I get to demonstrate a context where I can demonstrate my capacity for it, but without really fully assuming the mantle. And when I then look at the world and the institutions, or and talk to people who so clearly have, there's a kind of tendency among people who are deeply sensitive but also empowered to almost want to lead from behind, because leading from behind, the expression of leading from behind, it kind of gives us that sense of performing the task, performing the service, but without becoming egoically invested in the role, which is important, because if we're egoically invested in the role, leadership becomes something else entirely. But the people I'm around oftentimes are not erring on that side of things. They're erring on the side of kind of keeping their own empowerment in that way at bay. I would potentially count myself among them. almost as a way of just staying safe. Because leaders go out and get their heads cut off. Leaders make mistakes. Leaders make a mess. Leaders go and are responsible for unpredictable events taking place. You can never control the universe. And I think what I'm observing in myself and what I'm observing in some people who I sort of associate with a similar way of, living in a similar way of potentially kind of deflecting or avoiding that full claiming of our power is a sense that we're suffering way more by not being who we fully are, and by not saying, because then somebody else has to lead. Somebody always leads. I mean, I know that they're non-hierarchical institutions and all of that, and some of that is great, and those models are important, and there's a lot of development happening in the area of leadership. But the fact is, there still is a place for a sort of concentration of responsibility and decision making in certain types of organizations, and I think even within kind of organic communities, like a family or a community or a group, leadership is still, it is not irrelevant. That there's always, it's instrumental to the effectiveness of the group. It's not a reward for having the most leadership qualities of a group. It's not a reward bestowed upon the leader. It's a service to the group. If leadership is good, it will make the group more effective. If leadership is great, ideally every member of the group, if they are aligned, will understand the benefit that the leadership is providing them. And I think I'm wrestling with this. I'm wrestling with this in my own way right now, because I feel like there is maybe some ways that I'm not leading in the way that I could, and it's frustrating. It's kind of like having a tool or having a skill set that's not being expressed. It's never a good feeling. So I'm sharing this with you because I am looking for I'm externalizing something that otherwise could very easily I could just look away and kind of feel it as because what I could then feel it as is a kind of ripple of what I said when I got on the session today, kind of like unsettled energy that gets toddlers out of bed at 4 a.m. I'm not saying that's necessarily what happened. I'm just saying I associate them. But I don't want to feel this just as an unsettled energy. I think I can be more articulate about what's really going on for me and what I'm actually craving, and what I'm feeling called towards. I think I can say that is a form of leadership, and that I'm enthusiastic about creating that community. So that's something. It's a good place to start if you're looking at what's my next business venture going to be. What's my role as a teacher? I'm getting blasted by Madeline, my collaborators in that program, and So I'm taking a lot in right now. I'm trying to sift it down into a form that I can hold myself accountable to what I'm receiving and what it is provoking. So, thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate you. This conversation means the world to me. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.